Hi there, I'm Brooke Baldwin. You're watching CNN. Thank you so much for being with me. President Trump has gone way out of his way to downplay the White House's rough transcript of his call with the Ukrainian president, who he repeatedly urged to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter on Trump's baseless claims of corruption. But who needs a summary when you can hear it right from the president's mouth? Take a listen as Trump revives his Ukraine conspiracy, and adds China to the list.
China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine. So I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens.
That might have cleared things up for Senator Mitt Romney, whose initial reaction to the Ukraine call was the following, quote, "If the president asked or pressured Ukraine's president to investigate his political rival, either directly or through his personal attorney, it would be troubling to the extreme, critical for the facts to come out." Well, looks like you have your answer now, Senator. As for the Bidens, here's your daily reminder that there is no evidence of any wrongdoing by the former vice president or his son in Ukraine. And with respect to China and Trump's claim that the father and son got millions of dollars from the country, there is no evidence that former Vice President Joe Biden received a dime. And a lawyer for Hunter Biden pushed back on his characterization, calling it a, quote, gross misrepresentation. Team Biden says President Trump is, quote, desperately clutching for conspiracy theories that have been debunked and dismissed. In fact, just last night, before this latest attack, the former VP was a little bit more blunt.
I'm not going anywhere. You're not going to destroy me, and you're not going to destroy my family.
CNN's Jeremy Diamond is at the White House for us this afternoon. And Jeremy, it seems what the president had to say about China will only make things more difficult over there at the White House?
Very much so, and it all comes, of course, just before the president's team is set to restart those negotiations with China over that ongoing trade war. So this adds a whole new element to that. But what we saw from the president this morning, after days of him going after the whistleblower, seeking to discredit the whistleblower and that individual's claims, we now have the president essentially confirming what that whistleblower said in the complaint, confirming what was already clear from the transcript of the president's call, which is the president saying that he did indeed hope that Ukraine would start a major investigation into former Vice President Joe Biden as a result of that July conversation. And it was plain and clear for everyone to see in those comments that you played just moments ago, Brooke. And the president adding to that, of course, as well, also saying that he would like to see China investigate the former vice president. Again, as you mentioned, those allegations that the president is making about the former vice president and his son as it relates to China, there's no evidence that the former vice president received money from China as a result of those business dealings. But what we're seeing here, Brooke, really is, despite the fact that the White House does not have a war room on impeachment, that there is no clear overarching message that we're hearing from the White House, we're seeing the president really taking the mantle here and running the strategy himself. And that is simply to say whatever is on his mind, it seems, at the moment, and perhaps to put all of this out in public, as if to say it publicly rather than in a secret telephone conversation with another world leader would somehow normalize the behavior and make it more acceptable. But as you said, for those senators who were wondering what the president exactly was saying and what his intentions were behind that ask to the Ukrainian president, it's now out in the open and very clear to see. Brooke?
Yeah, he's basically like, China, if you're listening, in front of all the news cameras for the world to see. Jeremy Diamond, thank you very much. Jim Baker is the former FBI general counsel, as well as the director of national security and cybersecurity at the R Street Institute. He is also a CNN legal analyst. And so, Jim Baker, a pleasure, sir. I mean, what we witnessed today from the White House from this president, was that illegal?
It's unconstitutional. So therefore it is illegal because it's directly in contravention of the president's duties and responsibilities under the Constitution of the United States. He is not taking care that the laws are faithfully executed. He is not living up to his oath of office. And so this was a very dramatic day for America. In my opinion, a very sad day, too. I think it's a sad day and one that all Americans should be troubled about. The president, if he actually thinks that Joe Biden or any member of his family broke a U.S. law, right, and that's the president's responsibility is to enforce U.S. law, then he should refer the matter to the Attorney General and tell the Attorney General to ask the FBI, where I used to work, to investigate. That's the way this is done. You don't invite a foreign power, especially an entity like the Chinese government, to start investigating Americans, let alone Americans who are potential political opponents. The thing here that troubles me the most is that the president is abusing his power in order to stay in power.
But
that is Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, he's doing it in broad daylight. I mean, does he think by saying it publicly, does that somehow make it okay?
No, it doesn't make it okay. If you can't, you can't. I don't want to leap to making analogies, right? But you can't stand on a street corner and start proclaiming that you're going to commit a crime and then go do it and somehow have that be okay. The thing here is the president has so much power. The president of the United States has so much power that foreign leaders listen to him and they want to be on his good side because he is responsible for the whole executive branch, right? And so they want to do things that he wants them to do. And so him speaking the words in and of itself is the abuse of power. It is what is, again, against the Constitution. That's what we're talking about here. Not statutes per se, but the Constitution itself.
And how does this White House then even begin to fight this impeachment inquiry when the president is admitting this in broad daylight?
That's a good question, because he's serving up exhibit after exhibit for the congressional investigators, and he's writing the impeachment. He's writing the articles of impeachment for them. I was thinking earlier that this may be the first time we could have articles of impeachment with links embedded into it, with video linking to the president making the statements himself. I mean, it's so crazy. But he's serving up, and he's just making it easier for them. And they're going to have to do due diligence behind the scene. Yeah. But this is just, I don't know how, if you're at the White House, you deal with this kind of a situation. Yeah. It's just crazy. It's
links
crazy.
Embedded, example. And then cut to,
to CNN video, right?
To CNN
exactly.
video. Jim Baker, just stand by for me. I have more questions for you, but let me just get some more reporting in from Capitol Hill, where one of the key people mentioned in that whistleblower complaint, former Ukraine Special Envoy Kurt Volker, is testifying today behind closed doors to the House Intelligence Committee. Volker, who resigned the day after that complaint went public, is a career diplomat. Was a good friend of the late Senator John McCain's, and someone who CNN has learned was never fully on board the Trump train, at least in the eyes of this White House. He is also the man in a series of text messages with Rudy Giuliani, texts that Giuliani claims show the State Department was aware of his efforts to get Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. So let's go to Capitol Hill to our correspondent there, Sunlen Serfati. And so, Sunlen, we don't know, this is all behind closed doors. We don't know any details out of this, Volker testimony, but that isn't stopping lawmakers on both sides from putting their own spin on things. What are you hearing from them?
That's right, Brooke, and this is notably already a very lengthy briefing, now lasting already 4 hours plus. It's still going on right now behind closed doors on the House side of the Capitol in that classified room. But as you noted, lawmakers are coming in and out of that briefing, occasionally stopping to talk to press. Not much by way of substance. Lawmakers really refusing to wade into the details of what exactly Kurt Volker is saying behind closed doors, what exactly are those documents that we know were delivered last night to the committee, dozens of pages of documents on his behalf. So not much by way of substance, but Democrats, what we're seeing, their response really going after President Trump, with President Trump's new comments this morning, again prompting Ukraine and now China to investigate Joe Biden and his son. Here's what the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee said just a short time ago.
President of the United States encouraging a foreign nation to interfere again to help his campaign by investigating Iran is a fundamental breach of the president's oath of office. It endangers our elections, it endangers our national security. It ought to be condemned by every member of this body.
And similarly, we've seen Republicans essentially fall into their partisan camp. Brooke, Republicans leaving that meeting saying that the testimony was impressive by Kurt Volker today, but two Republicans saying that they did not believe his testimony in any way advanced the Democrats' impeachment agenda. Brooke.
All right, Sunlen, thank you very much. So, Jim Baker, back over to you here. Testimony happening 4 hours plus, still ongoing. Is the big question whether the State Department actually coordinated with Rudy Giuliani on his pursuit of dirt on Joe Biden?
No, I think the big question is, what did the president do? What did the president say? He said some of that today, as we were just talking about. But what did he ask Rudy Giuliani to do, and what efforts did he undertake? The president, under the Constitution, the president does have authority broadly to conduct the foreign relations of the United States. If he thinks that some type of personal emissary would do a job more effectively than perhaps a State Department diplomat, then he likely has the power to do that. So that's not, to me, the big issue here. The issue is, what did they actually say? What were they trying to get Ukrainian authorities to do? And was that a violation of the president's oath of office? That's what we need to come back to. The president's conduct. That's what's of big concern here. Mr. Giuliani and others, whether they violated criminal statutes having to do with campaign finance laws, that's something that the FBI could and should investigate. But the real question here, I think the gravest question for America is, what is the president up to, and what did he want them to do? And he's telling us again from the front lawn of the White House exactly what he thought. There's no doubt about it. I don't see how anybody could have any doubt about what the issue is here anymore.
Jim Baker, you have been excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of your insight
Thank you.
there. Adding to all of this moments ago, as he faces serious questions over his role in this whole scandal, the vice president is repeating those debunked conspiracy theories. Plus, CNN breaking news on this Thursday. I'm Brooke Baldwin. After what appeared to be an effort to distance himself from President Trump's push to get Ukraine to investigate the Bidens, Vice President Mike Pence has just repeated his boss's debunked conspiracy, although Pence denied speaking about Biden during his September meeting with Ukraine's president. Now, in that meeting, the Washington Post is reporting that Pence was, however, asked to deliver a message to Ukraine that hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. aid was still being withheld. A source tells CNN that Pence advisors are frustrated with the White House and are working to isolate him from all this fallout. But a source tells CNN that a top Pence aide was on that July 25th phone call. So with me now, CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel and Frank Bruni, a columnist for the New York Times and a CNN contributor. So welcome to both of you. Starting with you, what do you make of this latest move from Pence, that he's peddling this whole "there's nothing wrong with asking a foreign government for help" theory, but then also saying we knew nothing about it at the time?
Right. This is classic Pence. I didn't know anything about it. I'm innocent, but what do we know about him? He has been in lockstep with Donald Trump every step of the way. There is one word for Mike Pence, and that is loyalty. So there is no way that he is not going to come out and do this publicly. Mm-hmm. He has an audience, Donald Trump. But that said, we are told by his staff that they are very upset, that they're very concerned, that they feel that he is being implicated in this. It is the same thing, Brooke, as we're hearing from the Republicans on the Hill.
What are you hearing?
Which is that they are looking for a bigger desk to hide under. They don't know what Trump is going to say. They don't know what else is going to come out. And there is one person in charge of White House strategy, and we saw that yesterday, and that's Donald Trump.
What did you think of
You're saying strategy is a kind word for what he's in charge of, right?
I mean, what did you think of what he did today in front of the White House?
Well, I think Jamie's exactly right. He is saying, from his own mouth, we're hearing utter loyalty, but meanwhile, behind the scenes, aides are saying yes, but. But let's be realists here. Mike Pence had to know what was going on between Donald Trump and Ukraine. He cannot have believed that Donald Trump wanted him to put pressure on Ukraine about corruption because Donald Trump is so concerned about corruption. I mean, that doesn't pass the smell test. All around him in the White House, all this stuff is going on. He's got a senior advisor on the July 25th call, and you're telling me that person didn't go back to Mike Pence and say, during that call, the president actually seemed to tie Ukraine aid to digging up dirt on the Bidens. We're supposed to believe none of that reached Mike Pence. It reached the whistleblower. It reached all these other people, but he was living in some little bubble of purity? I don't think so.
What about what Trump said today? Essentially, China, if you're listening, go investigate the Bidens.
I think in Trump's mind, He's trying to send the signal, I'm doing so little wrong here, I'm willing to publicly own it. I'm willing to bring other countries, you want to get in on the action, come on. But
even though what he did is entirely unconstitutional, thus against the law.
His contention is it isn't. So if he's being consistent to his own contention, he's saying, I'm so unashamed of what I did, I'm proud enough to repeat the offer to another country out here in public. I mean, that's his thinking. But the thing is, it's wrong. And
it's wrong.
I mean, when he saw it, I thought, impeachment process, he's self-impeaching. Remember in the 2012 campaign, the Republican primary, they talked about self-deportation. We're seeing self-impeachment. The articles are going to expand every time Donald Trump gets to a microphone.
And I just got off the phone with a senior administration official who said that was, quote, a disgrace for him to say that. You do not reach out to a totalitarian government and say, come invest.
But you don't reach out to Russia and ask for help with Hillary Clinton's emails.
Correct.
Back to your point about they're all hiding under this, big desk.
A bigger desk.
I mean, they say one thing publicly, one thing privately, but I mean, does it just have to get worse and worse and worse for them to finally say, record scratch, all right, we're coming out and saying this is wrong? Or is that more fuel to their fire of deny, deny, deny?
I think there are two things to watch. How many Republicans are coming out to carry water for him? Are they going on TV to do this? So let's see what happens with that. Number two, watch Mitch McConnell. He is playing three-dimensional chess. He has 23 Republicans up in the Senate. If the Democrats net 3, he loses control of the Senate. They're watching the polls. And in the next couple of weeks, they're going to see what else comes out. But keep an eye on Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Key phrase there, they're watching the polls.
Right.
They're watching the polls. As long as they feel that Donald Trump turning on them on Twitter could cost them elections, they're going to stick with him regardless of the way he's trashing the Constitution. The minute their political survival is on the line, everything changes.
Can we talk about your op-ed, please, sir?
Sure.
The final graph, this was the headline for Frank's piece in the Times. If Trump goes down, he's taking everyone with him. And you end the whole thing with this. He's in a bind, he, of course, being Donald J. Trump, because his burn down the House defense against impeachment makes the best case that he must be impeached, that a leader with no bounds and no bottom can't be allowed to rage on unimpeded. The impeachment inquiry is laying Trump bare. As scary as that is for us, it may be even scarier for him.
He is using the word treason to describe Adam Schiff, and he's essentially recommending capital punishment for people who spied on him in the White House. He is acting in a way where I think he's making it impossible for the House not to impeach him, where I think he's creating the very possibility that over time Republicans will have to turn on him. And as ugly as it is for us in terms of what it's doing for the country, I think he's sealing his own fate. And now we're back to the self-impeachment we were talking about before.
Okay. Quickly, you want to add something?
And just to say, this is his default position. He loves to fight. And as someone once said to me, he picks a fight even when he's winning. Now he's under fire. He's not winning, but he's out there fighting.
Jamie and Frank, thank you both very much. Coming up next, I will talk to the author of this opinion piece entitled The Dangers of Donald Trump's Ignorance, why she says the president's pattern of lies in the face of clear evidence to the contrary could have an Just into CNN, Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign says that he will be discharged from the hospital and back home in Vermont before the end of the weekend. This, of course, comes after this blockage was found in one of his arteries Tuesday night, and 2 stents had to be placed in. The campaign also says Senator Sanders does plan to be at the CNN New York Times debate. That is October 15th. Is President Trump trying to impeach himself, even in the middle of an impeachment investigation where he is accused of trying to get a foreign power to investigate a rival? The president emerged on the White House lawn just today and asked not only Ukraine, but also China to do just that, to investigate Joe Biden. And my next guest writes for Time magazine that this level of ignorance on behalf of the president is dangerous. Quote, when he describes his thuggish conversation with Zelensky as perfect, and appears shocked that even some of his allies don't agree, he proves better than any prosecutor could his ignorance of his constitutional oath or even basic rules of decency. Nancy Gibbs is also the director of the Shorenstein Center, and so Nancy, a pleasure to have you on today.
Nice to be with you.
First and foremost, just your reaction. I don't know if you watched President Trump this morning in real time saying what he did, calling out China to investigate the Bidens. What was your first thought?
Well, it was another example that the problem isn't just that he says things that aren't true, it's that he believes things that aren't true. And in this case, that it is fine to call on foreign governments to investigate what he considers the corruption of his rivals. And that we see over and over and over again, that he honestly believes that the whistleblower is not a patriot but a spy, or that congressional leaders who are investigating him are guilty of treason. It's not just that these things are not true, it's that it tells us something about how he views his office, how he views the power of the presidency. And I think it's important that we reckon with the implications of having someone whose misunderstanding of his office is as profound as it is.
Misunderstanding, or you also get into this notion of ignorance, right? You really focus in, and so did actually Frank Bruni in his column too, on this word perfect, as he keeps describing his phone call with President Zelensky as perfect, saying that he basically didn't do anything wrong, and Republican lawmakers are echoing this. In your piece, you argue ignorance has a different intention than deceit, but that sometimes ignorance can be more dangerous. How do you mean?
Well, it's one thing, people who say all politicians lie, I don't subscribe to that, but there is a world of spin and exaggeration and selection of facts that is part of politics. This is something fundamentally different. The thing I found so striking about his call with President Zelensky was that this was not a moment of trying to rally his base or to set a public political narrative or throw a shiny object in front of reporters. Yeah. This was a private phone call between two heads of state, which gives you an idea of what he genuinely thinks is true. And in this case, he appears to genuinely think that he was the victim of a conspiracy between the Ukrainians and the Clinton campaign, and wants to pressure a foreign leader into providing the evidence of that. And so if you have a president who is absorbing conspiracy theories and embracing them and then activating his government to explore them, that is in a way even more troubling than just the sort of routine falsehoods that might come out of a president's mouth at any given day.
And then I was also just stunned by your point on Russian President Vladimir Putin, right, and how he has used deceit as performance art. Explain what he did and how there's a parallel.
So when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, they just completely lied about it and said that they weren't doing it, even though everyone knew that was a lie. And the very boldness of it was part of the process. If you can get people to doubt their own eyesight and instincts and judgment, and deceit and the elimination of the possibility of facts and reality has been part of Putin's
success
game forever. I think that is a different thing than what we are seeing here. As often as these two presidents have been compared to one another, Putin has gone about it very differently, but he has been very successful in, I think, infecting political discourse elsewhere with whether it's even possible to know what's true.
Yes. Nancy Gibbs. Really smart piece. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. We are watching Capitol Hill as a key State Department official testifies behind closed doors about how he helped set up meetings between Rudy Giuliani and Ukrainian officials. Also ahead, CNN has dug up a letter that shows how some Republicans have done a 180 when it comes to. That is what a Republican appointee was saying about Biden 3 years ago to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Turns out Joe Biden wasn't the only one calling for Ukraine to clean up its corruption in 2016. A bipartisan group of senators, including 3 Republicans, were doing the same. So where are those Republican voices today? As President Trump falsely accuses Biden of pressuring the Ukrainian government that year to fire a prosecutor in order to stop investigations into his son, again, there has been no wrongdoing either by Joe Biden or his son, Hunter. So with me now, CNN K-File senior editor Andrew Kaczynski. And so you did some digging. You find this bipartisan letter regarding Ukraine. What was it about and who signed it?
Yeah, so this letter was sent by the Ukraine caucus, which was a bipartisan, it's actually still around, it's a bipartisan Senate caucus dealing with issues related to Ukraine. And this letter that they sent in February of 2016 was to the then president of Ukraine, Poroshenko. And what it said was, I'll read the key line to you from it, which is, "We similarly urge you to press ahead with urgent reforms to the Prosecutor General's office and judiciary." That Prosecutor General's office is the same office that the Obama administration, European unions, others were pushing for Ukraine to, push out that prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, for, issues of not looking into corruption. I think I should probably preface this with there's really no there's no proof for any of the claims Trump has said about, Joe Biden pushing out this prosecutor to protect an investigation into his son. But what's really interesting about this letter is it undermines Trump's claims because it shows that there was basically bipartisan support.
The Republicans
for this.
and Democrats.
Republicans and Democrats. And their language actually echoes language that Vice President Biden used in a speech to the Ukrainian parliament in December. He said almost identically, you need to reform the general prosecutor's office and the judiciary needs to be overhauled as well.
All from K-File. Andrew Kaczynski, thank you for digging that up. We appreciate it. Coming up next, the striking similarities between President Trump and the first U.S. president who ever faced impeachment. The author of a book on former President Andrew Johnson breaks down what we... Now let's talk about a president who catered to white supremacists, whose outbursts and temperament were called unfit for office, and whose opponents in Congress were so disturbed by his behavior that they, quote, believed they no longer had a choice. Impeachment was the only way to stop a president who refused to accept the acts of Congress. Those are the words depicting not President Donald Trump, but President Andrew Johnson. He was the first president of the United States to be impeached back in 1868. And that excerpt comes from the book, The Impeachers, The Trial of Andrew Johnson and the Dream of a Just Nation. There is no mention of Trump in this book, but in describing Johnson's saga, Trump's just hangs over these pages. American historian and literature professor Brenda Wineapple wrote The Impeachers. And just reminding everyone, I asked you in commercial break, I said, when did you start writing this? And you said 6 years ago.
I know.
Under the Obama administration.
Absolutely.
No idea.
Absolutely. No.
The similarities between these two presidents are striking.
Yeah, they really are.
What is most striking to you?
Well, one is the kind of populism that Trump loves to go to the people. I think he's going to the people for a rally today, and that's what Johnson did. That Johnson was filled with anger and invective, and that he said things that were astonishing in his own time, just the way we hear expletives now. But more than that, there was a sense of the rule of law, and that Johnson really decided that he could, that he knew better than Congress, and that he could act alone pretty much without Congress. And that's why Congress and the people against him said, look, the president's not a king. You can't do anything you want. So, there are really almost uncanny similarities. Maybe it's true with anyone who's impeached that there would be those kinds of similarities, but they are striking.
In the case with President Johnson, the House voted to impeach. The Senate ultimately acquitted him, and we have the vote on the screen. We'll throw it up there. You can see, but it was one vote. One vote. So what happened? How did he survive? And how did that, taint his legacy forever?
Well, it came very close. On the one hand, it was just one vote. So that's pretty much a damning indictment. On the other hand, there are those who feel that if it hadn't been just one vote, that Johnson had in his pocket, or people for Johnson had in their pocket other votes. So there was bribery going on what today we call dark money, and there were wafflers. There were people at the last minute who felt maybe we shouldn't do this, and they got scared and they got cold feet. And these were people, the Republicans, not the same as the Republicans today, but they were in the majority, and they were the ones who were trying to get Johnson out of office, and they didn't do it. But to go to your second question, his legacy is deeply tainted.
This is what really stood out for me as I was reading your book. This was from despite the fact that he wasn't forced from office, that the nation learned an American president was not a king. That's a quote. That's what you wrote. And I just want to cite this New York Times reviewer writing about your book. The impeachment attempt, she's quoting you, had not succeeded, but it had worked. She then goes on to say, it's a noble conclusion to an illuminating book, but given how preoccupied we are with our endless news cycle, it is hard to forget the words of one disappointed specter way back at Johnson's trial. Most men prefer to be deceived, cheated, anything rather than to be bored.
That's so pathetic. I know.
What can we take away from history? How does a nation survive this?
Well, the nation did survive that, and that's partly what I meant when I said it worked. It worked in two ways. One is the process worked. There was a vote in the House Johnson was impeached. There was a vote in the Senate. He was acquitted, but he's always going to be impeached. Forever you remember that he was one of the very few American presidents that were impeached. So in that sense it worked, and the process was very orderly, and the country went on. So in that particular sense it worked, both in terms of putting a mark on him and his presidency, and also in terms of, of the resources we have for survival, which are important.
The book is The Impeachers. You were, I guess, unintentionally prescient in writing about such things.
I didn't create it.
Brenda Wineapple, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, this emotional moment inside a Dallas courtroom is prompting a debate in this nation over forgiveness. The brother of a murdered man hugs and forgives the ex-police officer. Polarizing words sparking an extraordinary debate over forgiveness and race. This after the brother of Botham Jean hugged and forgave former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger after she was sentenced to 10 years for killing Jean in his own home.
I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please?
The courtroom fell silent as these two embraced for nearly a minute. Emotions becoming so high, even the presiding judge was overwhelmed. Judge Tammy Kemp embraced Geiger and gave her a Bible.
I got 3-4 more at home. This is the one I use every day before I go to work. This is your job for the next month.
But the display of forgiveness inside the courtroom has sparked a heated debate over the judge's actions and whether Geiger, who was convicted on a murder charge, is even worthy of any forgiveness so soon. So with me now, CNN's Van Jones. He is the host of CNN's Redemption Project, this extraordinary original series bringing the families of victims face to face with their perpetrators. So nice to see you, my friend.
Yeah.
I mean, on this story, this has sparked such a conversation. And where are you on the subject of forgiveness?
Well, first of all, the crime is almost unforgivable. I mean, you have a police officer going into the wrong home. Rather than ducking for cover and calling for backup, she just shoots this guy who's eating ice cream in his underwear. And the verdict is really unfair. You get 10 years, you'll probably serve 5. I'm working with people who are serving 30 years for drug offenses where nobody got hurt. And so in the face of that injustice, what do? Any response is fine. If you're outraged and say, listen, I can't forgive this, I understand that. But I think the fact that this young man's brother, who knew him, and knew the kind of person he was, said, I forgive you because my brother would have. And I want you to give your life to Christ, to redemption, and I want to give you a hug and encourage you. That should be okay too. In other words, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but the idea that you have people who have that capacity, who can find that within them to say, this is completely unjust, but I wish you no ill will. And I don't want to become bitter. I don't want to become the hatred and the anger that I'm seeing take over this process.
He should feel empowered to
He should feel empowered
to
do that.
Yeah.
And I was moved by it. Listen, whenever there's violence across racial lines, it's freighted, man. Because it's like, are we going to accept this kind of mistreatment forever? Yeah. Is there going to be any justice here? But for an individual to say, I don't want to give in to hatred, I think is a good thing.
There have been all these conversations about what if the races were reversed.
Yes.
Charles Blow, opinion columnist for the New York Times, commentator here at CNN, this is what he wrote. Black people repeatedly demonstrate an otherworldly beauty in the granting of grace to the undeserving. But the question remains, where is America's reciprocity? When are black people in the wrong and in the vice granted this grace when our innocent black people granted this grace?
He's 100% correct.
Yeah.
It's because of our experience, with being enslaved, Jim Crow, terrorism. We have developed in our community almost a superhuman capacity for grace and forgiveness. The way that we see the Christian, command to love our enemies, to forgive, we take it very, very seriously. We don't see it returned. And I think often America takes our grace for granted. They assume that this community can continue to be brutalized forever and that we're never going to retaliate and do the things, frankly, that George Washington and other people did when they felt that they were being mistreated. Everybody assumes that black people are going to be forgiving. I don't think that it's a bad thing that we have this capacity. I think it's a bad thing that America doesn't respect it and doesn't reciprocate. But this is an example. We've had 2 interracial hugs now. We had the 2 little toddlers that hugged, and it moved the world. And now we have these two adults hugging. There's something about this. There's a desire for some kind of reconciliation in the country, but it comes at great cost to black people to extend it. I hope that white people look at themselves in the mirror and say, look, could I do that? Would I do that? Shouldn't I find a way to be more forgiving in my own life and with other communities of people?
Van Jones, I appreciate your heart and your compassion over these incredibly sensitive issues. Thank you very much. Nice to have you on.
Yeah.
And just one more note for everyone, just into CNN, Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign says he will be discharged from the hospital and back home in Vermont this weekend. This, of course, comes after news of his blockage that was found in one of his arteries. The campaign also says that the senator does plan to be at the